Good afternoon, everyone. Can someone tell me whether my voice is clear and is this screen clearly visible to all of you? Okay, so welcome to today's session. We'll be doing 14th to 17th Feb current affairs today. Okay, and tomorrow we will do 18th to 20th current affairs. In this way, we'll be on track with respect to current affairs. Okay, so without further ado, let's start with today's session. And we'll start with the ESI news first. So first news is related to inflation trends. Okay, so it is talking about wholesale inflation, which is WPI. Okay, and it says it eases to 3-month low of 0.27%, and it's a very good sign, especially not only in context of this, but we've also seen that CPI have also reduced. It has reduced not only from 5.8%, which was previously very high or near the higher target of Reserve Bank of India's inflation target, and now it has come down to 5.1%, and even core inflation has also come down to 3.6%, and similarly WPI has also been around 0.27%. Okay, so it's better, and please look out for what are the conditions that you will be seeing in concurrence with this. Always have this tendency to look at the macroeconomic trends and how they are impacting the current economic environment. आपको पता है कि inflation right now इतना चल रहा है. Also consecutively look कि how these are impacting the business environment, business profits and all those things. In this manner, you will be able to better realize how macroeconomics plays a role in economy in general. ठीक है? So with respect to exam, obviously you need to be aware of WPI and its constituents, ठीक है, and some basic details, for example base year as well as who publishes it, and we've discussed this ample amount of times, है ना? So if I ask you what's the base year for this and who is the publisher, can someone tell me? Yes, correct. It's not 2016. It's 2011 to 12. 2016 उसका है CPI Industrial Workers का, ठीक है? And it's not MOSPI. It is DPIIT Office of Economic Advisor, DPIIT, ठीक है? Ministry of Commerce and Industry. ये बेसिक चीज़ों में बिल्कुल गलती नहीं होनी चाहिए, ठीक है? This is the most basic that anybody who prepares for regulatory body examination or even any economic examination, they all know it, ठीक है? तो आप एटलीस्ट इन सब में गलती ना करें. Let's move on to next news, which is about India and 4 other countries voice concern at WTO dispute settlement reform proposal. So as all of you know, in WTO we've discussed this in ample amount of time that WTO has a dispute settlement body in which there are various trade agreements within the WTO, and if some country thinks that another country has some domestic policy that violates WTO agreement that all the country agreed upon, so that outer country can go to WTO's dispute settlement body and ask for removal of that domestic policy. अब इसको एग्जाम्पल के तौर पे आप ऐसे देखिए. For example, USA thinks that India's domestic MSP policy, है ना, it violates agreement on agriculture. So what USA will do? USA will go to WTO, and there is a special body, dispute settlement body. Okay, USA will go to DSB and will file a petition against India, okay, and this body will give a ruling over it. But right now, as all of us know, that this dispute settlement body is defunct in nature. That means it is right now not functioning, and this is mostly because of lack of quorum. What is quorum? That minimum amount of judges needed to be present on the bench in order for this body to function, which is minimum 3. So the appointment of the third judge is being held by the United States. So that naturally makes this dispute settlement body ineffective. So what the WTO reform proposals are? So reform proposals with respect to WTO have been suggested by the developed country, which they are saying that there should be a mandatory alternate dispute resolution and arbitration with respect to all the issues. And apart from that, they also want to categorize various disputes. So they want to categorize disputes into standard, complex and extraordinary complex. Basically, jitne bhi issues aayenge that one country has with another country, they want to introduce standardization, that this is a standard issue, complex issue, extraordinary complex issue. And these are only proposals. Okay? So you just might want to take this news with a pinch of salt. Just see what is the mentality of developed countries. Okay? What they are trying to impose, especially in WTO context. So you get to understand their national interest. Okay? And Indian and other developing countries, they also have their national interest with respect to development aspect. So they want to oppose such type of proposals. Okay? This is a little bit of static with respect to WTO, which is, it was established in 1995, headquarter Geneva, members 164, right now Director General Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. Okay? Next is our Chief Economic Advisor was recently speaking in some conference. He said it is very unfair to levy carbon tax on developing countries. So all those of you who have already done the WTO lecture that we are done in previous RBI course. So in that I have already discussed this carbon border adjustment mechanism that the EU had introduced. So in order to reduce emissions, EU started this carbon tax, which is also known as carbon border adjustment mechanism, in which what will they do? They will put, duty on imports from 7 specific sectors that are carbon intensive. For example, steel, cement, all those sectors. Because production of all these commodities require huge energy consumption and thereby carbon intensity. So import of all such production, if they are coming into EU, they will be, attracting a levy of almost 30 to 35%. तो बेसिकली अगर 100 रुपए का इंपोर्ट आ रहा है तो उस पर 35 रुपए का टैक्स लगेगा, तो 135 करेगा, 135 में एंट्री करेगा वो EU में, है ना. So what the developing countries is saying that this is a very discriminatory in nature. This is not the correct way to, do something about climate change, because in this way you are hampering the development or exports of developing countries. So obviously, अब India has a very huge steel exporting market. अब पूरा EU में इतना बड़ा restriction लगा दोगे तो naturally India's steel exports will become uncompetitive. Okay, and it will naturally impact India's external trade with European Union. Okay, so this is what this adjustment mechanism is, and this mechanism will come into effect from 2026. Okay, and it will put duties on 7 carbon intensive sectors, for example steel, cement, fertilizer, aluminium and some others. Okay, तो आप इसका नाम जान के रखिए, फुल फॉर्म पता होना चाहिए, कार्बन बॉर्डर एडजस्टमेंट मैकेनिज्म, ठीक है, कब से एप्लीकेबल हो रहा है वो पता होना चाहिए, एंड हाउ मेनी सेक्टर्स इट इज इम्पैक्टिंग, दिस यू शुड नो अबाउट. नेक्स्ट इज इंडिया रिजेक्ट्स EFTA's exclusivity demand. Okay, so first of all understand what this EFTA is. So this is a 4-nation European Free Trade Association. Okay, it includes Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway as well as Switzerland. So these are the countries that have opted out of European Union. So right now India is actually in talks or in negotiations with this association with respect to an FTA. ठीक है, अब यूरोपियन यूनियन के साथ तो FTA की बातें चल ही रही है, जो कंट्रीज यूरोपियन यूनियन के बाहर है उनके साथ भी चल रहा है ना. इवन विद UK ऑल्सो सेपरेटली FTA negotiations are currently going on. तो इसमें these countries asked for a particular clause in the free trade agreement which India rejected, which was about data exclusivity. So this is particularly related to pharma companies. What data exclusivity means, that whatever clinical trials that any company that will be there in these countries have done with respect to production of any particular drug, okay, those clinical trials data shall remain exclusive to the manufacturer or the initial manufacturer. That's what the data exclusivity means. But India actually opposed it. India said that this actually will hamper the production of generic drugs. आपको पता है कि सिप्ला की जो दवाइयाँ हैं उसके अगेंस्ट में generic drugs भी आपको मिलते हैं, and generic drugs will have the same composition, but obviously it will be a very cost effective. जो दवाई आपको पैरासीटामोल 10 रुपए में मिलेगी वो आपको 1 रुपए में मिल जाएगी. This is what generic drugs do. And how does any manufacturer produces generic drugs? They oversee the clinical trials on whatever composition happened. तो वो clinical trials का data बहुत जरूरी है generic drugs बनाने के लिए. But if you put data exclusivity clause, so the generic drugs manufacturer will not be able to access those clinical trials. So what will they do? They will either wait for that exclusivity period to end, then only they can get access. तो उसमें time बहुत ज़्यादा लगेगा. Or either they have to do their own clinical trial that anyways will incur more cost. तो फिर वो जो आपको सस्ते में मिलती है वो सस्ते में नहीं मिलेगी. So naturally it's not a win-win situation for India, because India has a very huge population that cannot afford high cost medicines. ठीक है, तो it is in this context India actually rejects this data exclusivity demand of this EFTA. Okay, so first of all understand that this is related to drug and pharma. Also understand that European Free Trade Association have these 4 nations in it, and these are the 4 nations. Also remember the name. Is this clear to everyone? And this is a little bit data with respect to the trade India does between EFTA countries. Exports to countries stood at 1.92 and imports at 16.74. So naturally huge trade deficit. Okay. Let's move on to the next. India-Nepal signed pact for linking UPI and Nepal payments interface. So it is another agreement that India has done in context of internationalization of UPI. Okay? So if I ask you, with how many countries India has signed this type of agreement, what will you tell? At least give me names. किस किस के साथ हो गए? That's correct. France, श्रीलंका, सिंगापुर, UAE. हाँ बस ठीक है. अभी हम लोग एक और न्यूज़ पढ़ेंगे जहाँ इंडिया सोच रही कि हर एक कंट्री के साथ साथ करने के बजाय एक ऐसे इंटरनेशनल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के पास जाते हैं जहाँ से सारी कंट्री के पास यूपीआई पहुँच जाए. सो दैट न्यूज़ वी विल ऑल्सो सी. नेक्स्ट इज अ न्यूज़ विद रिस्पेक्ट टू आरबीआई डायरेक्टिव ऑन अ पेमेंट कार्ड नेटवर्क. Obviously in the news RBI hasn't named to which company it has sent this directive, but at least let's see what the directive is all about. So at least we get to understand that what is happening in context of payment systems. So RBI says that a card network has been utilizing unauthorized route for B2B payments, business to business payments. आपको पता है कि for example, take example of Maruti Suzuki. Maruti Suzuki obviously utilizes steering wheels in cars. So sometimes in order to not produce steering wheels within their own manufacturing plant, they outsource it to some other vendor or some other business. So that other business will send steering wheels to Maruti Suzuki and Maruti Suzuki will give payment. So that type of payment is business to business payment. There is no customer involved in this. Okay. So all such type of payments, one company was utilizing, unauthorized route for doing business to business payments. And what is this unauthorized route? So RBI says that this unauthorized route allowed businesses to make card payments through intermediaries, okay, to entities that do not accept card payments. तो देखो हो क्या रहा है यहाँ पे. Think about Maruti Suzuki, ठीक है. एंड ऑब्वियसली इतना बड़े स्केल पे मत सोचना, छोटे स्केल पे सोचना. थिंक अबाउट मारुति सुजुकी एंड थिंक अबाउट कंपनी कॉल्ड सुब्रोस. So Maruti Suzuki wants to do, credit card payment or even debit card payment, or you can say card payment to this Subros company. But Subros is saying that I don't accept card payments, whatever the reason may be. So Maruti is saying कि अब कैसे करें payment? So Maruti what utilizes an intermediary services. कोई एक entity होगी बीच में, ठीक है? What this entity will do? They will accept card payment. Okay, money received by it, and this money will be provided to Subros via NEFT, IBPS, or RTGS through net banking. तो RBI says ये जो पेमेंट का तरीका आप कर रहे हो, दिस इज अनऑथराइज्ड. ठीक है, your payment should be like this. And why RBI is saying this? Because such type of payment route is not present in Payment and Settlement System Act. Settlement System, Act. So obviously this type of payment route is right now unregulated. इसमें कुछ issue हो गया, तो who will, safeguard either the sender of that money or either the receiver of that money, because there are no rules and regulations with respect to such type of payment transactions. तो RBI says इस type की activities को बंद करो, और RBI will now definitely be pondering over making guidelines of such type of transactions. ठीक है? Is this clear that what's the issue has been? Any doubts in this to anyone? So obviously RBI is saying कि one of the most important factors behind which RBI took this decision, RBI says कि अब देखो इसमें issues क्या क्या है. There will be a lot of companies utilizing these intermediary service. So this intermediary must have huge amount of cash on its own. अब ये cash this intermediary can potentially misuse. ठीक है, अब बहुत सारे इसमें possibility आ जाते हैं in context of हवाला transactions, money laundering and all those things. ठीक है, so we do not want that. And another thing, think about any other entity. अब ये तो चलो मान लो agreement है तो इनको payment मिल रहा है, but अगर कोई और entity है, कोई और दूसरा B2B transaction है, इस कंपनी को पता ही नहीं कि किस कंपनी ने मैं पेमेंट किया है, and this company also does not know that how this payment has been done. क्रेडिट कार्ड से हुआ है, किस कार्ड से हुआ है, तो this also violates transparency as a value in context of payments. ठीक है, तो These were the various issues because of which RBI actually suspended such type of arrangements, which you can find in all the data. Okay? So even though RBI didn't name any card network, but in newspaper it was mentioned that Visa acknowledged receiving such communication from Reserve Bank of India regarding the matter, and it stated that it has been directed to hold all transactions involving such type of nature. Okay? Next is growth in bank credit likely to moderate in financial year 25. So this is the report from S&P Global. So S&P Global is saying तो इनिशिएटर तो वही है ना, कार्ड कंपनी अरे आप ये सोचिए ना, अलाउ ही क्यों करना है, पूरा ट्रांजैक्शन तो कार्ड नेटवर्क पर ही हो रहा है ना. So let's focus on next news, which is growth in bank credit likely to moderate in financial year 25. So what the S&P Global report is saying, that the systems level credit growth for financial year 25 will moderate from 16% to 14%. And this is mostly because, not because that there is any issue with respect to economy in general, or with respect to any issue that is there within the banking system. Okay, but the most important thing is that they are saying that there exists lack of deposits in the economy, and this is mostly, self-explanatory, because as you understand that there has been increased, interest rates or policy rate has been increased on account of controlling inflation. So the people have less liquidity within their hands, and there also exists huge unemployment nowadays. Okay, and because of which the deposits is very low. So because of this particular reason, that the S&P Global says that the growth of credit will reduce. And apart from that also, in the remarks they said, if the deposits started increasing, then the credit demand will also, or the credit growth will also increase. Okay. Next is ESIC added 1.88 million new members in December 23. अब देखो इसमें फिर important तो यही है ना कि we get to understand that how much monthly on average these organizations are adding members. ठीक है, just like how we try to remember in context of GST also. So if I ask you in context of GST, average monthly collections कितना चल रहा है? Anyone? Yes, correct, Adit. It is 1.6 lakh crores, almost close to that. And what was the average of GST that was mentioned in the budget by Honorable Finance Minister? Yes, correct, Vinay. 1.66. बहुत बढ़िया. ठीक है, ऐसी चीजें इंपॉर्टेंट है, याद रखना. Next is bulk of, in financial year 24, wealth gains by super rich comes from AI. So this is a list. Okay. In this news, just take a look at this list. It tells you about how much money these super rich businessmen have increased on account of AI. So because of AI, the total increase of wealth has been $37.1 billion of Mark Zuckerberg. Then comes $19.6 billion of NVIDIA co-founder. Jeff Bezos 16.1, Steve Ballmer 9.6, and Larry Ellison of Oracle 7.3. Okay, so just remember the list. This is what the data is with respect to AI induced increase in wealth of these businessmen. Next news is regarding LPG imports increasing to 60% in 5 years. And this is obviously consumption induced, that because of huge consumption increase, the imports have also increased, and huge consumption increased on account of what? On account of one major famous scheme of LPG, which is, what's the name of the scheme of LPG? उज्ज्वला स्कीम है ना. तो उज्ज्वला स्कीम से almost every household in the country started utilizing LPG gas connections. So because of which now they've got LPG gas connections, so उनको चाहिए LPG gas. So naturally, how will you get LPG gas? Through imports. So that's why the report says that it has increased by 60% in 5 years. Okay, so and this was not only the singular reason. Another reason was stagnant domestic supplies. So in context of energy, as all of you know that how much India is dependent on the external world with respect to that. So imports increased from 11.4 million metric tons in 2017 to 18.3 million metric tons in 22-23. And in the same period, if you see domestic LPG production, it only grew by 4%. तो उतने से क्या होगा? Whereas consumption expanded by 22%. So how will you meet this expanded percentage of consumption? Obviously through external imports. So when the imports will increase, the naturally import cost will also increase. So it increased to $13.3 billion in 2023 from $5.8 billion earlier. अब इसमें increase is not only because of the quantity, but 46% increase in the cost is mostly due to increase in price of LPG. ठीक है. अब आपकी कॉस्ट कैसे बढ़ेगी? या तो प्राइस बढ़ जाए या क्वांटिटी बढ़ जाए. क्वांटिटी तो बढ़ी हुई है, लेकिन आपकी 46% कॉस्ट प्राइस इंक्रीज की वजह से हुआ है. अगर प्राइस सेम रहता है ना, तो 46% इसका हटा लो, आप इंक्रीज का हटा लीजिए, तो फिर वही चीज है. नेक्स्ट इज यूएई, कतर, सऊदी एंड कुवैत सप्लाई ओवर 95% ऑफ इंडियाज एलपीजी इंपोर्ट्स. तो ये चार याद रखना. दिस फॉर्म्स द मोस्ट, and UAE being the top supplier in context of 2023. Okay? And even household consumption constitutes nearly 90% of LPG usage, with Uttar Pradesh being the largest consumer, followed by Maharashtra. And this is mostly population based. Next is India improves on 85 SDG parameters as told by UNESCAP report. The report title being Asian Pacific SDG Progress Report Showcasing Transformative Actions 2024. ठीक है. It's an important report. Sustainable development issues आपके syllabus में mentioned है ही, तो आपको ये report का data पता होना चाहिए. So just remember that in 85 sustainable development goal parameters, India has improved. It stagnated on 27 and worsened on 36. ठीक है. तो ये तीनों डेटा आपको पता होना चाहिए. Just revise this data in here, okay? And I will add this whole report in detail in the report and indices document part B, okay? तो rest assured वहां पे भी मिलेगा, but इसका मतलब ये नहीं कि आप यहाँ ना पढ़ें, वहां पे भी पढ़ लेना आप. ठीक है. It will help you in revision also. So India's performance compares favorably with its peers in Asia Pacific region. Okay. And the report also says that most countries will likely to miss SDG target for 2030 with a large gap of 32 years. मतलब उनको 30 के बाद 32 साल और लगेंगे अपने SDG गोल्स को अचीव करने में. So it will take them up to year 2062 to achieve these goals. But naturally we will see 2030 में just like how it happened in context of multilateral development goals MDGs. तो जब तक 2030 आएगा there will be some other type of goals. Okay, and overall average progress towards all 17 SDGs in Asia and Pacific region has increased slowly from 4.4% to only 17%. तो जितने goals हैं उसमें केवल 17% they have achieved. Okay, and it's not like कि कोई एक particular achieve कर लिया, हर एक goal में थोड़ा थोड़ा achieve करके, if you count overall then only 17% have been achieved till now. Okay, so this is the important data with respect to this report. Please try to remember it. Next is Paytm bank customers can use basic services till March 15th. तो वो deadline has been extended, which was previously Feb 29. ठीक है? And nothing else is there. Next is government plans to designate rare earth, pharma and IT as critical sectors. Okay? Because right now in context of IPEF, Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, the government has recently signed IPEF supply chain resilience agreement. So with respect to supply chain resilience agreement, they have to specify that what sectors you find critical sectors for their own country, because then only the cooperation will happen on all these sectors. IPEF चालू क्यों हुआ था? Because of supply chain disruption on account of COVID-19 as well as other Russia-Ukraine conflict and all those things. So at that particular point of time, especially in the Asia and Pacific region, the countries within those regions thought about having a specialized supply chain network where at least these countries will ensure smooth supply chain of all those critical minerals or critical sectors which they think. So India is considering pharmaceuticals, electronics and critical minerals for their critical sectors. Okay? And rest is data about IPEF. So 14 IPEF members are there. Okay, they need to identify sectors for supply chain up to 120 days after the date of entry into force of this agreement. So this agreement will come into force on February 24. Okay, after this month. And they've also talked with respect to establishment of these 3 supply chain bodies that will support the whole supply chain ecosystem. The first being Supply Chain Council, Supply Chain Crisis Response Network and IPEF Labor Rights Advisory Board. Okay, तो ये 3 bodies भी आपको पता होने चाहिए. This is a very huge agreement. Please try to remember this. And this is a little bit of IPEF, that what it seeks to strengthen. These are the 4 pillars. Trade pillar, supply chain, clean economy and fair economy. India had joined 2 to 4 pillars. That means India hasn't joined the trade pillar. Okay? And obviously India has various inhibitions with respect to this first trade pillar, and obviously this is mostly due to that trade pillar has some clause that are in contravention to their national interest. So this is what I was talking you about, that instead of doing agreement with 1, 2 or 3 countries, India is now seeking to go to a particular international institution and try to internationalize the UPI as well as other payment services. So this is what the proposal of India is. At WTO, India proposes lower cost of cross-border payments. Okay, so cross-border remittances specifically, India wants to reduce their cost. And the cost will only reduce if you adopt digital payment methods. And how will you ensure digital payment methods? You provide UPI services. So just like how it happened in context of India-Singapore agreement, with respect to cross-border transaction, India is now trying to scale it at WTO. And because even the developed country like France, even India's neighbor and even India's extended neighbor, they have joined with India with respect to the cross-border transaction utilizing UPI. It provides credibility to India's technology also. Now at the global scale also, every other country, especially the members of WTO, will now try to push for such type of agreements. Now if you see the proposal promotes interoperability, interlinkages of digital payment infrastructure, including fast payment systems, to achieve cheaper, faster, more transparent and accessible cross-border payments. अब ये कितना भी sophisticated language में लिख लें, बात तो वही है, कहना तो आप वही चाहते हैं कि बेसिकली हम यूपीआई को इंटरनेशनलाइज कर देंगे, है ना? दिस इज द प्राइमरी मोटिव. अब फिर उसके बाद ऑब्वियसली यू कैन कोट सच टाइप ऑफ बेनिफिट्स दैट लोअर ट्रांजैक्शन कॉस्ट इज क्रूशियल फॉर रिड्यूसिंग इनइक्वालिटी, अलाइनिंग विद एसडीजी. Global average cost for digital remittances is 4.84%, significantly lower than non-digital remittances. Okay, and out of total 860 billion remittances, developed countries received 78% of it. And such type of proposal is supported by Philippines and South Africa. तो मैं बता रहा हूँ आपको, जितने भी developing nations हैं, they will come in support of India with respect to this. So naturally, this is the very good instance of India's growing clout, especially in context of world. सत्यन इसमें ये बोल तो रही है ना, 4.84% का आपको कॉस्ट लगेगा. बेसिकली अगर आप 100 रुपये भेज रहे हो तो लोगों के पास कितना 95.16 रुपीज पहुंचेगा, है ना? ये तो सरकार बोल ही रही है. एंड दिस इज अ ग्लोबल नॉर्म एंड इट इज कंसिडरेबली लो. अगर आप नॉन डिजिटल वेज के थ्रू भेजोगे तो विद इन द डोमेस्टिक सेगमेंट ऑब्वियसली इट इज फ्री यूपीआई customer to customer transaction, and government is doing so because it is like a welfare function, obviously promoting this. But in context of international transaction, जब आपको मान लीजिए 10 रुपए देना पड़ रहा है in context of non digital, तो यूपीआई यूज करके अगर आप 4 रुपए भी दे दोगे तो क्या बुरा है? ओके बहुत सारी चीजें होती हैं. मैंने इट्स नॉट लाइक यूपीआई हैज स्टार्टेड इन इंडिया जस्ट नाउ. इट टुक ऑलमोस्ट अ डेकेड फॉर यूपीआई टू बिकम व्हाट यूपीआई इज राइट नाउ. तो कोई भी आप इकोनॉमिक टेक्नोलॉजी तुरंत नहीं ला सकते, एंड इट विल टेक, चलो मान लो 10 साल नहीं लगेंगे तो यूएस को एटलीस्ट 5-6 साल लगेगा. एंड इट कैन नॉट डिसरप्ट द होल इकोनॉमी. वो थोड़ा थोड़ा पायलट स्टेज में करने की कोशिश करेंगे, and they think it's not worth it. So that's why I was saying कि बहुत ऐसा होता है ना कि अब जैसे 2 कंट्रीज हैं, इंडिया है एंड रशिया है, और एक टेक्नोलॉजी है मान लीजिए, ठीक है? तो इंडिया, अब आप कह रहे हो कि रशिया ने तो ये टेक्नोलॉजी बना ली है, इंडिया क्यों नहीं बना लेता? अब उस टेक्नोलॉजी को बनाने में इंडिया को लगेगा बहुत साल. आप टेक्नोलॉजी रशिया से मंगा लो, ठीक है, उस टेक्नोलॉजी के बारे में सीख लो और उससे अपग्रेडेड वर्जन इंडिया में बाद में बना लो. तो दैट इज द पर्पस. ठीक है? इन दिस मैनर एवरी अदर कंट्री इज ऑल्सो थिंकिंग लाइक दैट कि यूपीआई बनाएंगे और उसके बाद वो सब करेंगे, अप्लाई करेंगे, तो दैट विल टेक अ लॉट ऑफ टाइम. देखो बहुत सारे बेनिफिट्स हैं बाय यूटिलाइजिंग और इंटरनेशनलाइजिंग यूपीआई. ठीक है, थिंक अबाउट इट कि पहले तो इंडियंस के लिए बहुत फायदा है. इंडियंस व्हेनेवर दे विल गो आउटसाइड दे डू नॉट नीड टू चेंज देयर पेमेंट इंटरफेस और दे डू नॉट नीड टू डू एनीथिंग. ओके, एंड फिर इसके पॉसिबल एप्लीकेशन भी बहुत ज़्यादा है कि अभी इन केस फॉर एग्जांपल थिंक अबाउट इट, that right now only remittances is happening in terms of cross-border payment. But in future, think about it that ki some business in France or some business in UAE, they want to do transactions with Indian companies, so it is very much easier for them to do transactions. तो फिर उससे exports के लिए बहुत फायदा है. And you know, as India's clout gain in the whole world, तो Indian rupee will also gain clout. ठीक है, तो फिर internationalization of UPI will push internationalization of rupee. और रुपी अगर हार्ड करेंसी बन जाती है तो जस्ट लाइक हाउ IMF SDR वैल्यू इज डिराइव्ड फ्रॉम 5 मेजर करेंसीज, तो इंडियाज करेंसी विल ऑल्सो गेट इंक्लूडेड इन दैट. इंडियाज करेंसी विल ऑल्सो बिकम मेजर करेंसी. तो इंस्टेड ऑफ डॉलर्स इंडियन रुपी विल ऑल्सो बेनिफिट. ठीक है, अब आप बेसिकली डॉलर दे के ऑयल खरीदते हैं, बट इफ इन लेटर स्टेजेस रुपी becomes a major currency, so you can pay rupee to various countries, for example UAE and all those countries. आप उनको रुपी देके अपना ऑयल सिक्योरिटी पा सकते हैं. तो there can be various benefits that can come out of internationalization of UPI. I'll take all of your doubts later on. ठीक है, पहले इसको फिनिश कर लेते हैं. Next is India likely to grow more than 6% between financial year 23 to 28. Okay, this is a report by Goldman Sachs. Okay, this report says that, and the basis of this report is that the GS is saying that number of affluent customers will rise to 100 million by 2027 from 60 million in 23. Okay, and this increase in affluent consumers will drive economic demand in the economy, and that will obviously expand the GDP in the country. That's why they are saying that India will grow more than 6% annually between 23-28. Okay. Now comes the ASI report, Annual Survey of Industries report, with respect to employers and contractual workers. So there are various important data in here that you can utilize in context of India's labor outlook, that how India's employees are employed. So you can see 2 of every 5 workers employed in industrial establishment, and we are specifically talking about industries particularly. Okay, so 2 of 5 every 5 workers, which is 40%, are contractual hires in 2021-2022. And if you see the trend every year, the number of contractual hires by industries are increasing. Okay, so this data is released by Ministry of Statistics and Planning Implementation, and this data shows that a total of 13.6 million workers were employed by 249,000 factories across India. Of them, 54 million workers, this might be 5.4 million workers, or 40.2% were contract workers, the highest ever, compared to 39.4% in the preceding year. Okay, then there are some news with respect to female employees also. So among the remaining directly employed workers, which will be around 60%, the report says the women workers across that industry only rose slightly from 18.1% to 18.42%. So this is in context of direct employment, not contractual. So direct employment is, let's say, 60%. So within 60%, women workers are only 18.42%. Very low still. Okay, and with respect to total amount of wages and salaries paid to workers in financial year 22, it stood at 629 trillion, of which 0.6 trillion was paid by employers, only 10.87% contribution. Okay, then we have which states are prominent in context of contractual workers. They say the share of contract workers is highest in Bihar and Telangana, followed by Odisha, whereas Kerala has the lowest share of contractual workers. Okay, and state of contractual workers in UT of Delhi stands at 134%. अब ये percent का मतलब क्या है? Basically, if it is saying 134%, that means if you have 10 employees, that means, or 100 employees, that you are also employing 134 contractual employees. Whereas if you have, है ना? So this is what the report says. Now let's move on to the national news. National news is with respect to Defense Ministry's procurement from government e-marketplace model crosses 1 lakh crore. So just remember this name, this data that will suffice for you. Then we have this PM Suryodaya Yojana has been renamed as PM Surya Ghar Muft Bijli Yojana. Okay. This data is very much clear, as we've discussed this previously also, that it aims to light up 10 million households and enable them to have free electricity up to 300 units every month. Okay, and within that, if you see that no cost burden on people, and all stakeholders will be integrated to an online portal because they will be provided substantive subsidies and heavily concessionalized bank loans with respect to installation of solar rooftop panels. And this is with respect to that only, that banks will also link with national portal for rooftop solar to provide real-time data access to consumers and stakeholders, and lenders are already offering loans for solar rooftop. तो basically इसमें हो क्या रहा है? Just like how, जैसे अगर आपको मुद्रा लोन भी वगैरह लेना है ना, तो गवर्नमेंट हैज सम पोर्टल, इवन इंश्योरेंस के लिए, फसल बीमा के लिए भी गवर्नमेंट हैव सम पोर्टल. तो सिमिलरली इन कॉन्टेक्स्ट ऑफ दिस स्कीम द गवर्नमेंट सेज दे विल install a portal where you will find all the stakeholders related to that particular scheme on that portal only. तो आप वहाँ पे register करोगे, you will find these banks also. ठीक है, these banks will be offering you various loans, and obviously those loans will be concessionalized. This will help you pick a loan whichever you want, and through that loan you can install these solar rooftop panels. और फिर उसके benefits तो आपको पता ही, you will get up to 300 units electricity free, and अगर कोई additional units है, you can sell it back to the government or grid also. And the most important thing, आप target याद करके रखिए, and obviously the name which has been changed, तो वो भी याद रख लीजिए. Next news is electoral bonds have been stated as unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. Okay, and they stands null and void after the judgment. The Supreme Court says that electoral bonds or the anonymity within the electoral bonds is against the right to freedom of speech and expression, the fundamental right under Article 19, and also it goes against the principle of right to information. Okay? And obviously it goes against right to free and fair elections because there is no transparency with respect to political funding. So that's why the government or the Supreme Court struck down this scheme of, electoral bonds. Next is NGT directs National Highway Authority of India to pay 45 crore fine for violation. And what is the violation? Land acquisition in context of Bharat Pariyojana in Haryana. ठीक है, तो आप बस ये नाम याद कर लेना किसको penalize किया NGT ने in context of what. Next is trade deficit narrows to 9-month low in January, and this is amidst the Red Sea issue that was happening, which the government was concerned about, that because of Red Sea, might not these exports or these trade deficit we might, those things can get hampered. So that didn't happen, and the data which came out was positive. So you can see in January, the export registered a 3.12% year-on-year growth, lifting hopes for the coming months. Okay, and this merchandise exports have grown for the 4th month in January in the first 10 months of financial year 24. Okay, and the trade deficit have also been reduced. 17.49 billion, it's the lowest. Okay, and if you see this data, you will easily realize that what is happening, because this is a yearly data from January 23 to January 24. This is export line, red, okay, and this is import, and the area between these two shows you deficit. And if you clearly look at this position, the deficit is barely minimal. So this is what the news report is saying. Okay, always with respect to such type of data, always focus upon the trends. Trends will help you understand the whole scenario with respect to exports. अब इससे क्या होता है, अगर आप डेली न्यूज़ में ट्रेंड्स पर फोकस करेंगे तो जब भी इकोनॉमिक सर्वे या फिर कोई बड़ी रिपोर्ट आती है तो यू कैन ईजिली रिलेट विद सच टाइप ऑफ डेटा, वरना समझ ही नहीं आएगा, वरना लगेगा कि हाँ क्रैम कर लेते हैं, अब आगे डेटा तो पढ़ना ही पड़ेगा, ठीक है। बट अगर आपको पता चलता आ रहा है कि हाँ अभी कुछ क्वार्टर्स पहले कम था एक्सपोर्ट्स एंड व्हाट वर द रीजंस एसोसिएटेड विद इट, एंड इवन आफ्टर रेड सी इशू इट स्टिल हैजंट बीन डन, तो you can better relate, or you are better aware of what is the conditions of exports and imports. Next is government forms panel to draft norms on pesky calls. ठीक है, pesky call कुछ नहीं है, जो आपको फोन आते हैं प्रमोशनल, क्रेडिट कार्ड ले लो, लोन ले लो, आपको बहुत शानदार लोन बना के दे रहे हैं, क्रेडिट कार्ड बना के दे रहे हैं, लॉन्च मिलेगा, है ना, सब मिलेगा आपको। वो सारे कॉल्स के अगेंस्ट या उनकी गाइडलाइंस के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में गवर्नमेंट इज फॉर्मिंग अ पैनल दैट विल मेक गाइडलाइंस, एंड द पैनल सेक्रेटरी इज, और द पैनल चेयरमैन इज रोहित कुमार सिंह, कंज्यूमर अफेयर्स सेक्रेटरी। द आइडिया इज द गवर्नमेंट इज सेइंग सच टाइप ऑफ कॉल्स वायलेट्स द प्राइवेसी ऑफ द कंज्यूमर. Okay, so this is what the news is all about. Next is 4th Property Guru Awards, in which DLF Cyber City developers emerged as the biggest winner. Okay, they won award in the Best Sustainable Developer category. And the awards happened in the Athene Hotel in Bangkok. Next is the AI integration in e-Jagrati portal will help reduce pending cases. Okay, because this portal will then provide simple, fast and more cost-effective consumer dispute redressal solutions. Then we have first green hydrogen plant at Cochin International Airport. Okay, so BPCL will build India's first green hydrogen plant of capacity 1000 kilowatt in Cochin International Airport. Okay, so for this BPCL will invest $18.16 billion over the next 5 years, and this will naturally help India reduce greenhouse gas emissions because it's an alternative fuel. It will reduce fossil fuel consumption, and it will also help in achieving net zero carbon emissions by 2070. ठीक है, and then Gintari, a Malaysia state-run oil and gas company, has emerged as the winning bidder for India's solar projects. Okay, totaling 185 megawatt. Then we go to international news. The International Energy Agency. So this energy agency that was developed after 1973 oil crisis. Previously, India was not a member. India was only an association member. India has now recently requested for official membership of IEA. ठीक है? तो recent meeting of IEA in Paris, this is 2024 ministerial meeting and 50th anniversary also. Okay, so in this meeting all the member countries of IEA will discuss India's membership within IEA. Okay, and if approved, India will become a member of IEA. ठीक है? India, and obviously India is projected in one of the reports of IEA. IEA has projected India's oil demand to grow by 1.2 million barrels a day between 2023 and 2030. And this, what this says, it will be more than 1/3 of the global demand. Okay, its headquarters in Paris, 31 members, head Faith Birol. Next news is about various developed economies, especially in the G7 countries, and their economy is going into recession. So if context of definition of recession, it at least the technical recession is said by two consecutive quarters of contraction. If your economy is experiencing, then your economy is technically into recession. Okay? So recently, in the previous couple of years, we've seen that Germany entered into technical recession. Right now, Japan also enters into technical recession. Japan unexpectedly slipped into a recession at the end of last year, losing its title also as the world's third largest biggest economy to Germany. So right now, US, China, Germany, and then Japan. और फिर पांचवे पे who is there at fifth? Anyone? Who is the fifth largest? Which is the fifth largest economy? There are various reasons associated with it. You know, sluggish demand in China, sluggish consumption and production halts at unit of Toyota. You know, various reasons are there. Obviously, the biggest, even though China and Japan relations are not that much good, but their economic relations are huge. So whenever China sneezes, Japan naturally catches cold. Another reason, another economy, United Kingdom also slumps into recession. And they slumped into recession in second half of 23. GDP contracted by 0.3%. Okay, and follows by 0.1% shrinkage between July and September. Another bad news coming from Germany. They are saying German economy will still likely to contract for a second year. Okay, so biggest economy will shrink by 0.5% this year, marking a second consecutive year of recession. ठीक है, quarters होते हैं, यहाँ इनके years of recession चल रहे हैं. Next is Iran fires first ship-based long-range ballistic missiles. Okay, it was launched from Shahid Mahdavi. Next news is EU sanction on Indian company along with Chinese companies that are doing business with Russia. Next is Indonesian Defense Minister Prabowo Subianto wins presidential election in Indonesia. Okay? So just remember the name. It's important, especially in context of phase 1. Then we have MOU, agreements and conferences. Specialty Steel PLI attracts 12,900 crores of investments. Okay, the PLI scheme in context of specialty steel. 57 MOUs was signed for about 12,900 crores worth of investment. Next is Zept and Boston Dynamics to deploy autonomous robots. Zept is a Gurugram based software provider for construction management. Okay. Then we have Tata Power getting letter of intent to acquire Jalpura transmission unit for 838 crores from REC Power Development and Consultancy. Okay. Next, JSW. They are saying going big on Odisha because they will be investing in these three sectors: steel, cement and EVs, accounting for almost 2 lakh crores in the state of Odisha. Okay. Next is Mahindra Inc.'s pact to buy EV parts from Volkswagen Group. Okay, they have recently signed an agreement to source components in its EV vehicles from Volkswagen Group. So this naturally tells you what? That EV's production is on the rise, and at least in the future, most of the companies will push for EVs. So this gives you direction with respect to future also. India and Greece joins hand for defense and shipping. Okay, they'll do cooperation in defense and shipping, as the goal is also there of tripling defense exports to $5 billion over the next few years. India's exports to Greece. Next is Reese aircraft to anti-tank mines, green light to big ticket purchases. So the Defence Acquisition Council cleared acquisitions worth of 84,560 crores for the armed forces, and these include 15th reconnaissance and multi-mission maritime aircraft for Navy and the Coast Guard, 6 fighter refueler aircraft for Indian Air Force, new generation anti-tank missiles for the Army also. Okay. Next is ISRO's Naughty Boy rocket to launch India's latest weather satellite today. Or that means, okay, so it says that GSLV F-14 will be launching India's weather satellite INSAT 3DS. And why is it called naughty? Because it had mixed track record in the past. Kabhi successful hua, kabhi nahi hua. Okay? And why they are talking about it? Because it is carrying the NISAR satellite, which is a satellite developed jointly by USA, NASA and India's ISRO. Okay, and the objective of this NISAR satellite is mapping entire globe in 12 days and provide consistent data with respect to changes in Earth ecosystem, ice mass, sea level rise, natural hazards like earthquake and tsunamis. Okay. Next is simple news. SpiceJet MD Ajay Singh and UAE based firm submit bids for bankrupt Go First. India to develop engine for new Arjun tanks. Okay. So this is another initiative in context of indigenous development or indigenous defense development. Okay. And this was obviously, sometimes the issue which we face always acts like a blessing in disguise or opportunity in disguise. So German firm selected for the project expressed its inability to deliver the power plants in time. Okay. So Army placed an order for worth 180 Arjun tanks worth 7,523 crores. So DRDO has taken this opportunity with itself to produce those engines. Okay. So these are Dartan 1500 engines. With respect to sports news, in context of badminton Asian Team Championship, the 17-year-old Anmol Kharb seals historic title for Indian women. Okay. PV Sandhu also won her singles match and clinched gold. And this happened in Shah Alam, Malaysia from Feb 13th to 18th. With respect to table tennis team championship held in Busan, okay, so Indian paddlers Ahika Mukherjee and Shrija Akula achieved an incredible feat at this championship. They defeated world's top two players, number 1 and number 2, in their respective singles match against China. But overall, they were not able to win any matches because they lost both her matches to world number 4 Wang Manyu. India hands over chess Olympiad torch to Hungary. Okay, so next chess Olympiad will happen in Hungary. This you need to remember in context of, phase 1 examination. In context of awards and ranking, Indira Gandhi Award for Best Debut Film of Director. Okay. And even Nargis Dutt Award for Best Feature Film on National Integration. Both are incorporated in 70th National Film Awards. ठीक है. अब इसमें हुआ क्या, इंदिरा गांधी अवार्ड को नाम चेंज करके नरगिस दत्त अवार्ड कर दिया. In context of obituaries, Udan actor Kavita Chaudhary, India's beloved Lalita ji, dies at 67. Imtiaz Qureshi, known for reviving Dum Pukt style of cooking. आप लोगों ने वीडियो देखी होगी रैमजे गॉर्डन की, जब वो बिरयानी के लिए हैदराबाद जाता है. How many of you have seen that video? Well, Imtiaz Qureshi, the chef that was there with Ramsay Gordon, okay, this news is about him only. Next is former India's skipper Dattaji Rao Gaikwad also passes away in Vadodara. Okay, so this is all for today. If you have any news, if you have any doubts, feel free to ask me. Otherwise, we'll wind up this session. विनय यार दोनों important है, and I'll tell you why. Because the phase 1 GA naturally has such type of news, for example sports on all those miscellaneous news, but जो भी important news आती जा रही है ना, ESI finance की तरफ more inclined हो रही है, and apart from that they are also including schemes that are being usually provided in PIB. तो फिर दोनों ही important है और करने पड़ेंगे, और अगर आप दोनों करोगे that will naturally fixes your current affairs problem for not only phase 1 but also for phase 2 as well. ठीक है, तो उस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में आप दोनों कर लेना. In context of CA quiz, I'll see what I can do. ठीक है, मैं बताता हूं आपको, नेक्स्ट वीक से देखते हैं. तो स्टैटिक सिलेबस के लिए आप अपना सिलेबस कंप्लीट करिए. आप जस्ट सी द वीडियो विच Ashok sir has made in context of how to start preparation for Reserve Bank of India. So in context of all those syllabus topics, he have already mentioned what you need to do specifically. Okay, so just type how to prepare for RBI and type crack grade B, you will get the video. चलो, थैंक यू गाइस फॉर ज्वाइनिंग, विल मीट इन द नेक्स्ट सेशन, ठीक है। टिल देन कीप रिवाइजिंग। कल हम लोग करेंगे 18 से 20th, ठीक है। तो चलो एक काम करो, अगर आपको स्कीम्स करनी है तो ऑल ऑफ यू ट्राई टू डू दिस स्कीम। आई विल गिव यू स्कीम्स दैट आर मोस्ट लेटेस्ट एंड मोस्ट रेलेवेंट। ये स्कीम प्रिपेयर करके आना, कल मैं क्वेश्चंस पूछूंगा, ठीक है। सत्यम देखो ऐसा है, अगर आप पहले तो आप PDF फॉलो करो, अगर उसमें कुछ समझ नहीं आ रहा है देन यू कैन ऑब्वियसली गो फॉर लेक्चर्स ऑल्सो, ठीक है। तो दैट विल बी बेटर अप्रोच, एटलीस्ट इफ यू वांट टू कंप्लीट द सिलेबस ऑन टाइम। Anything else? Chalo, thank you guys for joining. We'll meet in the next session. Thank you.